occasionally we'll see a new logo introduced for a company, and we'll look at it and we'll kind of go, really? That's the best they could come up with?
What's up, branding experts? Arek here at Ebaqdesign, and welcome to On Branding Podcast, the only podcast where I interview branding experts to give you actionable tips on everything branding and beyond. And in this episode, I interview Bill Gardner, and we talk about generating logo design ideas. And Bill established himself as an influential figure in logo design space through his brand called Logo Launch, which is the world's largest logo design gallery and book series. So every year, Bill puts together logo design trends report, surveying the logo landscape for over 20 years. And Bill still manages to work with clients under his own design firm, Gardner Design. So he has released about 10 volumes of Logo Launch book with extra 4 volumes which are master series, and these books contain some of the examples of best logos from top designers. But Bill also published a book about the logo design process, that's called Logo Creed, and this is the book we are going to talk about today. So Bill is an expert when it comes to logo design, and that's why I really wanted to have him on our podcast. Hello, Bill. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on our podcast.
Excellent. Hey, Arek, I'm so glad to be joining you. This is going to be fun.
Sure. You review a huge amount of logos, new logos from top designers, every year. But you also design logos and brand identities for your clients. I wanted to make this podcast practical for our listeners. So we would love you to share with us some tips for how to come up with better logo design ideas, because you are so experienced, whether it is for designers who just want to level up and be more creative, or for entrepreneurs who would like to just learn about the process in order to generate better ideas for their logo.
Yeah, one of the things that is just really fortunate for me through Logo Lounge is having contacts with so many just incredibly talented logo designers around the world, and becoming friends. We have a lot of good conversation, and this is a topic that comes up very often, and probably is one of the most asked questions about how do you develop great logos. And I suspect you probably know George Bakwa, the designer. He was one of our jurors in Logo Lounge Book 11, and he made the comment to me that, and I love the way he kind of developed this analogy, but it was that as designers, that it's a little bit like fishing, that if everybody sets their hook to the same level and we're kind of fishing in that same water towards the top of a lake or the sea or a pond or whatever it is, we're all going to catch about the same fish. Right. But once you really get into a project, if you start diving deeper and deeper in that body of water, you're going to go through a period there where you don't appear to see much of anything, but then you're going to get to the bottom and you're going to start to see fish and things that you've never seen before. And I think it's this amazing analogy of too many people are fishing in that same water, where we're all working with those same basic premises and ideas when we start to work on a logo. And it's too easy for us to quit when we think that we're hey, we've got a couple of fish, we can eat these. But if you really put that effort into it, you're going to take that effort down to a level that other people haven't experienced before. And you're going to start introducing ideas that they've not seen before. And of course, that's an analogy. But in reality, I think the premise of what George was saying, and this is repeated by other designers, is that too many of us stop too quickly. We don't take our investigation deeply enough and try and get into areas that others aren't in. So if you're looking at what everybody else is producing, and of course it's valuable to do that because it gives you a good sense of where the market is, but you also have the peril of potentially creating exactly what everybody else is doing, and that that may not be bad for some clients, but in reality, it doesn't move the industry and what we do forward with branding.
Right. So you right. So, and this is awesome because you mentioned so investigation is really important, right? So, and this is actually the first one of my first questions, because every logo design project should start with some kind of discovery and research, right?
Yes. Yes.
Uh, so in your book, you talk quite a lot about discovery phase
Mhm.
when it comes to researching the company and its history, if it's a rebrand or its vision for the future, if it's a startup, and
Sure.
then defining the scope of work and perhaps the brand personality and the tone of voice that would be appropriate for that brand, and
Correct.
then conducting some competitive research because the ultimate goal is to differentiate us, right?
Right.
Uh, so can you just talk a bit about the importance of discover and research, prior to actually, jumping right into sketch generating logo design concepts, sketching ideas and thinking about the aesthetics. So how important is that, and what questions should we ask either ourselves if we are doing this in-house, or just our clients if you are working with clients?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I wouldn't enter into a project that I was not allowed to go into the discovery process first. I how can you? If you think about it, it's kind of like saying, I want to be a doctor. I'm just going to go start cutting on somebody, but you know nothing about what you're cutting, or surgical procedures, or you've never schooled as a doctor, or and as designers, gosh, one of the great things is that we have that opportunity to learn new fields and new clients. Every week we take on somebody different, it seems like. And when you start working on what is going to represent that client, it's impossible to do that unless you have this tremendous foundation in who their clients are, who they are, what's their personality, how are they perceived in the market, who are they selling to, how are they selling, why are they selling, what's the history of this particular entity, how did they get to where they got to, and there's all of this information which ultimately impacts the decision of the consumer on why they're going to build a brand affinity in the first place. And I hate the fact that there are so many designers that are very facile. They're very they don't get into the discovery on the front end outside of some very, very basic questions. And that is truly what makes the difference between an exceptional brand. And when I'm saying brand, I'm certainly not meaning a logo. I mean, that is a part of it. But what makes the difference between a tremendous brand and a failed brand is that entity's ability to understand who it's selling to and its consumers. So when we start with a new client, certainly we meet with their stakeholders, those individuals that are going to ultimately have some say in this. But also imagine this: their impression of themselves. Arek, your impression of yourself is
Right.
probably not a real accurate impression to other people. We all tend to, the way I picture myself probably is about 20 years younger, but I realize that to other people, that's not what they picture. So it's also so critical to spend this time through survey work or coming to understand what the outside influencers think of, that particular client. I think it was, uh, I'm trying to recall who it was that made the comment that, a brand isn't what we say we are, but a brand is what they say we are.
Yes.
And that's really so true. Maybe that was Jeff Bezos that made that comment, but how do we get to that point? Because if we're just listening to our client and we receive a brief from them telling us what to do, then it is a very jaded perspective of what we're actually creating. The outcome of that discovery process really needs to be a design brief or a document which serves as your guidelines and objectives that is agreed upon by the client and by you. And I don't know how a designer can even get into a project without having that kind of a document, because it does two really important things. One, it serves as your director, if you will, and gives you a set of elements that have to be achieved. But secondly, it protects you with your client so that when it comes time to present to them and you show them your work and you say it does this and this and this and this going down your brief,
right?
They can't deny it. There may be some subjective opinion in there, but if they come back to you at that point and say, yes, but did you consider this? That's your opportunity to say, well, no, we didn't consider that. We didn't put that in the original design brief. But if you would like to put that in there, we can certainly go back and do some more design. Of course, that's going to be at an additional fee,
right?
If we want to include that. So that's why it's important that both the client and the designer agree to this document before the work process starts.
Nice. So it's really important, just to sum up, for designers or either entrepreneurs. So for both, it's really important for designers to understand the company and understand the landscape, and then combine it with your design skills to produce great work. And for entrepreneurs, you have to have an agreement. Sometimes, like from my own experience, I have sometimes clients, they ask me, hey Arek, what do you think about this logo and that logo? But I wasn't involved in the process. I don't know the company. I don't know the history. I don't know your objectives. I can just judge your logo design concepts from the aesthetics point of view. But you really need to have that foundation, right? And
yeah. Arek,
make
you and I both, because I know you're a very talented designer. Occasionally, we'll see a new logo introduced for a company, and we'll look at it and we'll kind of go, "Really? That's the best they could come up with." But at the same time, we also recognize sometimes we'll look at those and we'll go, "Man, I know they're a much better designer than that," and we can almost read into it that the client probably directed them down this alley towards a solution that ultimately didn't please anybody, or we look at a solution and we go, "Wow, I really hate that," but I don't know what the design brief was. I don't know what they were told to do, and as far as I know, they may well have surveyed their audience and found that this ugly design is the absolute thing that speaks best to them. So you make a great point that unless you know the objectives that a designer was designing to, it's really, really hard for us to make a super critical judgment of their work.
Right. So you need to have some guidelines. You need to have some criteria. Otherwise, it's just going to be like whoever got the more power here, whoever is the decision maker, it's just going to be like about some personal preferences, and it's not going to be objective. It's going to be very subjective. So
I love the fact that you just used the word objective in there, because designers live in a very subjective world. And I try to press this point because we don't work for other designers. We work for clients that usually live in a highly objective world. And, just as a differentiation of words, if you're dealing with any C-level position within a company, a CFO or a COO or a CEO, they are objective thinkers. And to them, if they brought in 12 accountants, let's say, and said, add up this column of numbers, all of those accountants should be able to come up with exactly the same sum. That is an objective problem. A subjective problem is, as designers, if they brought in 12 designers, they could have all of them designing a solution that would represent that company, and all of them may be just amazing solutions, just incredible solutions. They will be very different answers.
now we are going to take a quick break here, but we will be right back. Listen, my mission is to help people design iconic brands. So whether you're a business leader who wants to be more intentional with branding and all of its aspects, or you are a creative who wants to attract powerful clients and truly be able to help them with branding, then you need to start with a discovery session and then develop a strategy that will inform all your creative work. And everything you need to learn how to do that you can find in my online courses at ebaqdesign.com/shop, where I share with you my worksheets, case studies, video tutorials, and other additional resources to help you feel safe and strong about your process. And now let's get back to our conversation with Bill Gardner. So now I want to talk about different types of logos, because in your book you say, quote, designers and non-designers alike are guilty of using words such as logo, icon, symbol, and mark interchangeably, so as interchangeable synonyms, but they don't really mean the same, right? So in your book, you make this distinction. So can we just talk about what's the difference between different types of logos, and how to decide on which one we should choose for our project?
Sure. Do you mean such as whether it's a word mark or a symbol?
Right.
Or
monogram, pictorial mark, abstract mark, word mark, yeah. Right.
So let me share just a little bit more, maybe deeper thinking on this for just a minute. And I know that this is something that you're very familiar with, because I'm familiar with your work with archetypes. But I'm going to talk for just a minute about brand personality and how that affects your decision as to if it is a crest or a monogram or a hard geometric conceptual symbol or what you have in there. There's a really wonderful individual whose name is Jennifer Aaker, and I'm going to spell that last name, so if any of your listeners want to look it up, they can. It's Aaker. And the professor at the University of Stanford. And she is in marketing. But back in 1997, she basically did a really incredibly extensive study that says, much like people have personalities, brands have personalities as well. And she ended up breaking down branding into a total of 5 different dimensions. And just very quickly, I'm going to say that the dimensions are sincerity, excitement, competence, sophistication, and ruggedness. And for each of those different dimensions, there were a series of trait words associated with it. So if it was sincerity, if a brand had a level of sincerity, words like authentic, original, family, these are all words that have connotations of sincerity associated with them. And though no company is just purely any one of those personalities, as designers, by trying to break down your client into a couple of those personality groups and saying maybe that a company is 60% sincerity and 20% competence and 20% excitement, then we have the necessary things we need to be able to make the kind of determinants that you just suggested. So I'll give an example here. When we talk about sincerity, companies that rank very highly on sincerity might be Coca-Cola, Hallmark, Disney, Campbell's, Pillsbury. And if I think about brands like those, let's specifically think about Coca-Cola and its script. Think about the Disney logo and how it's handwritten. Think about Hallmark and that kind of scriptiness. Now, this isn't to say that all sincere companies have a logo that is done in script, but in fact, the reason that that's in script is because that autograph, that signature, gives the impression of authenticity or of the word of the individual behind it. So as designers, we intuitively know many of these things. If I go all the way down to rugged, and I say rugged is companies like Dodge Ram or Levi or Timberland or Caterpillar. These are all brands that have these relatively chunky letter forms, as part of their brand, of their word mark. And part of that is because that letter form, being as weighty as it is, gives that impression of more solidness, of coming back to ruggedness. If we look at competent companies, they typically are going to be companies that have a midweight letter form. A lot of times their symbol that represents them, if you think of UPS or FedEx or Maytag or Lexus, these are all companies that fit into competency very squarely, are going to be midweight letter forms. Often if they have a logo, it's going to be somewhat conceptual as opposed to literal. So because we have these cues as designers that we recognize that help identify these types of personalities, if we can identify the personality of our client, then we can start to look at other clients that have that kind of personality and pick up on the tones that best represent that personality. I'm not sure that I would use a monogram, as you had just suggested, that was very light and full of great detail and frill if I was working on a company that sits squarely in a highly rugged category.
Right.
It might be more perfect for somebody in sincerity. If I were using an old world looking crest, I probably wouldn't attach that to a company in excitement, because excitement tends to fit with trait words that are about things that make you feel on edge or make you feel a little bit uncomfortable or get your blood pressure up or your pulse rate up. So intuitively, we as designers know those different visuals that represent different cues for a company. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So just to sum up, basically, brand personality plays a huge role in determining, what kind of the style you should go with and type of your logo. So just to go over those different types of logos just for our listeners. So basically, based on your discovery and research, you should determine. You could determine whether you should go with monogram. So, for example, like IBM, CNN. If the name is long, or if for some reason you might want to use the first letter, like a letter form or like an initial, right? Yeah. Or perhaps pictorial marks. It could be a pictorial mark like Apple or WWF logo, right? Which is basically just a literal representation, a visual representation of some things, some fruit or an animal. So, go ahead.
So your suggestions you're making are all tremendous examples. The challenge that we have as designers is that just as valuable as I will tell you, using personality to help define a client is, it's just one component of our brand thinking. So, I mean, as we both know, there are so many different layers, complexities in considering, how to best identify a company. So when you start talking about is a monogram right? Is it just a single letter that serves as a mnemonic device, like Caterpillar's letter C, to remind you that, okay, it's going to be a company that starts with the letter C, or if it is something like ABC or NBC or CBS, where we actually use a series of letters that represent the company, or UPS. Those are all, really critical considerations that you have to make in there. Am I going to work with the initials of the company, or am I going to cast those aside and spell it out as United Parcel Service, and and deal with a symbol that like the one that Paul Rand had originally designed that was so beautiful, but even that had an opportunity for UPS, and these are all just, there are so many thousands of decisions that we have to make, and I think as designers we forget that with our experience and sageness, that we tend to take a lot of these decisions for granted because we just naturally know how to do them. I I don't know how much you know about me, but I actually put myself through school doing magic, and in magic there are any number of moves that you can do to make an object vanish or disappear. So I could hold a coin in my hand and make that coin vanish, but it's a simple mechanical move that I go through, but I have to make it look very natural. And because I've done it so many times, I don't have to think about it when I do it. I can just make the coin vanish. But as a young designer, a young designer can become so caught up in the process that their decisions don't create a natural and an evident solution. And the more they learn, the more natural certain decisions come to them. They're designing for a client that has, some level of elegance associated with them, or sophistication. They naturally might go to all capital letters in a serif font that are broadly letter spaced. I mean, just they don't have to think about that. They just know that is one of those visual cues that we use to kind of symbolize elegance. So, the more experienced designers have, the easier it is for them to kind of naturally not have to ask every question that's out there.
Right. Yeah, and I do know that you're a magician as well, because I've done and I think I've listened to some like on the Logo Geek podcast, for example. You tell the story. So for you guys but most of our listeners probably will know you because you're pretty known in the industry. But for those young, these are just starting designers who don't know you yet. Bill is also a magician, so he uses this analogy. Just because you can make this trick, so you practice so many times to do this trick, so it looks natural, right? And you use this analogy for designers because as designers we know our craft, and if we do it all over and over and over and over again, some things we just is just like we do unconsciously, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so natural for us, but it's also helpful. We sometimes need to like take a step back and just either write this down or just elaborate on that, like also explain it to the client why we've made those decisions, why we go with this kind of style, or why we decided on going with this type of logo. Because some types of logos will work better for some, for some either for some brand names or some categories,
Sure.
there are some factors that, there are advantages and disadvantages of each. So, but this should be better.
I'm really glad you said that, because it's a situation where sometimes you and I become so comfortable because we already have that knowledge that we forget why we've done it. And it's important to remember why we do something, because over a period of time things change. And if I vanish the coin exactly the same way every time, eventually somebody's going to catch on to what I'm doing. So it's important for us to be aware that things change. Different audiences view different things in different ways, especially over time. Otherwise, you and I are designing logos that really look like they should have been designed 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's important that we too be very cognizant of those selections and decisions we make design-wise, so that we don't find ourselves becoming dinosaurs.
Right. Okay, so there is a lot of things, there's a lot of different factors, and but you go into details in your book. So I really recommend for you guys to check out the book, and there are many different considerations, and questions that you can ask your clients, or questions you can ask yourself internally if you're a business leader. So now let's just jump into so once we've done some research and have done some discovery and made some decisions, and have this design brief, now we want to know how to generate better logo ideas. So where do we find inspiration? Where to start? Because in your book you say, quote, "There is nothing more dangerous than just having one idea." So basically, you recommend to start off by generating tons of ideas and sketching a lot, sketching many different concepts, and not. And at the beginning, you recommend to don't just stop yourself from judging them, and just go for quantity. Mm-hmm. and then you go for quality, and then you revise them, maybe combine those ideas and so on. So you shouldn't rely on some kind of a lightning strike of genius, as you said. Mm-hmm. So you need to really sketch a lot and try different concepts and try different ideas, and eventually you will narrow it down to some promising ideas, and then you can execute them, right? So can you just talk to that
I love
a bit?
the fact that you pulled that particular quote out, which is, "There's no idea as dangerous as the only idea you have." And somebody shared that with me years ago, but it's so true. When we only have one idea, then it's basically saying you haven't worked very hard so far. But so let me just say this in regards to idea generation. None of us live in a vacuum. And our clients don't live in a vacuum, and the consumers don't live in a vacuum. Symbology and symbolism is continually shifting and changing. There are a whole series of elements that 10 years ago didn't exist, whether it would be the Wi-Fi symbol or the cloud symbol or the little hamburger that indicates more information, on a website, or, all of these things. Symbology is a very, it's a very active, dynamic, it's, continually shifting and changing. But one of my greatest beliefs is that as designers, we get somewhere quicker by standing on the shoulders of others. And that means, taking a look at what other designers have done to give us some level of inspiration. Now, inspiration is very different than theft. And I'm not talking about stealing at all. But when, for instance, somebody becomes a member of Logo Lounge, and Logo Lounge, which has, close to 350,000 logos that have been uploaded by the members, and it is a paid site, and it's $100 annually. But when you go on there, you are able to search through those logos in such a way that, for instance, if you were designing a concept, and maybe the concept was excitement, and you type in the word excitement, then you're going to get, literally hundreds of logos associated with the word excitement. So you can see how other designers have dealt with that. Or maybe you've decided that you're going to design a logo and it's going to be a fish, and you type in fish and you may get 2,500 fish logos that come up, or you can start to limit that down to the very best of logos. So you only get 500 fish or something like that. But you've got to be able to be aware of what other people have done, because it is what the consumers are already aware of and responding to. Now, again, not saying to take somebody else's ideas, but before there was Logo Lounge, there were plenty of logo books, and there still are. And one of the reasons as designers we get them isn't necessarily to look at our work. It's to look at the work of others and to look to them for influence and inspiration in how to show an idea that is fresh. I'll end this comment with this. We work in a world of cliches, and I hate to say that, but a cliche is that idea that's been used over and over and over so many times. But it's called a cliche because it works. It's called a cliche because people understand it. Our objective as designers is to take an idea that may appear cliche and overused, and like George Bakawa said, to fish so deep with that idea that we start to bring up new ways to demonstrate that idea. It still may be a cliche, but it's going to be something that somebody looks at and goes, wow, I've never seen anything like that before. It's how good we are as designers is the proof of, our ability to take a cliche and present it in entirely fresh concepts so that nobody realizes it's a cliche.
Right. And I think it's a great tip for all designers, for all people who want to design better logos, to just go beyond cliches, and take it further, and just experiment with that. So yeah, as you mentioned, you can look for inspiration on Logo Lounge, and you categorize all those logos, and these are some of the best logos out there because these are some of the top designers, and it's just easy, to type in some keyword and it's going to show you a bunch of different, how other designers approach a similar subject, right? So it can inspire you. It's not to copy, because that's not the goal of the logo, and that's a theft. But it's just to inspire you and see what was done, and how can you perhaps use that or combine some different concepts from different logos from different designers.
I couldn't say it better.
So this gets us closer to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is trends in logo design, because you review a lot of logos, and you're probably the most experienced person when it comes to logo design, the trends in logo design industry. So we were talking about cliches. Now I want to talk about trends a little bit. So what's the difference between a cliche and a trend and something that goes out of style, and how to determine whether we should rely on some trends or whether we should just be more conservative and try to make the logo timeless and classic? What do you think?
Sure. So when we put together the trend reports, and those, by the way, are for free on the Logo Lounge site, you can just go up under trends and take a look at our trend reports going back to 2003. Trends, to me, now, first of all, let me couch this. Trends and trendy are two entirely different words. A trend is a trajectory. A trend is looking at evolution. If something is trending in a direction, it doesn't mean that it has stopped there. It just means that things are trending in that direction. They're moving. And when we identify trends, there are so many things out there that don't fall within our trends that are beautiful design, that are masterfully done. So it's not saying that you need to follow trends. The reason for identifying trends is so that you can start to see how design is evolving. And I'm going to use this analogy real quickly. If I were to show you a map, and let's say it's a map of the United States, and I were to put a pin right in the middle of it and tell you that this is a person and that they're traveling, where are they going to be tomorrow? You would have no idea, because you don't know which direction they're going or how they're traveling, if it's by air or by boat or by car. You have no idea. But if I were to show you that same map and say, here's where that person is today, here's where they were yesterday and the day before that and the day before that, then you can start to see, well, okay, that person is traveling about 500 miles a day. They're traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast. And then you can forecast where you think they're going to be. So let's apply that to design. If you're looking at logos and you see that suddenly there's a lot of kind of focus on the use of transparency, or that suddenly this gradation that occurs inside of a monoline that shows transition seems to be in effect, you have a couple of choices there. You can say, okay, I'm going to disregard this. Or you can say, I like what's going on there. I'm going to emulate that in my design. And that's, I think, the worst. Or you can say, you know what? I like this idea of a gradation occurring inside of a monoline because it shows transition and it shows a path. But I like the idea of this line, instead of it being a monoline, starting to open up and undulate. Then you've just evolved an idea forward, so that you are taking something that has already been going on, but you're introducing your own ideas into it in such a way that it's moving ideas forward. And this is the beauty of looking at trends that are occurring. Every one of us lives by trends. What we read, what we eat, where we shop, the things that we wear. All of that is based in trends. It's what we do with those trends, the way we elect to mix up our wardrobe, the shirt that we buy with the pants that we put on, with the shoes that we get. We make our own look out of that. But all of those elements came about because of trends. And that's where we utilize trends in logo design, is to be able to identify where we are evolving to and the trajectory of design, not just saying, I want to do that trend.
Right. Yeah. So just to sum up, so trends are about the evolution, right? So,
Exactly.
so you look at the trends and then you think about how you can take it, and whether you can use it to for your designs, because you think it's a great way to express whatever you need to express from the brief. So let's say you have some keywords, right? You write down those keywords, then you search for those keywords on Logo Launch, and you find some ideas, you find some trends, and you think, can I apply it? Can I do something with that? Maybe I can combine this with some, maybe I can do something similar but better because I could use it differently, and things like that. So, but also I just wanted to mention for our listeners, so sometimes some logos don't have a long lifespan, right? So like, for example, you mentioned in the book, like Olympic Games, right?
Yep.
But other logo design projects, you may want to avoid trends, and you may want to make the logo super like timeless and classic, as timeless and classic as possible. So there are some considerations. If the logo is one-off event, maybe you could use trends, because the next time you will have to design a new logo. Or if it's
all I do is I report on those. I never show a trend and say, I sure love this. What I do is I say, I'm reporting. I'm identifying these clusters of similar logos that are doing something technique-wise or subject-wise or in whatever way that are common and new. And I'm reporting on them. And some of them I hate. Some of them I do like, but all we can do in a trend report is report them. It's never a matter of endorsing it and saying you should do this.
Right. And you even say that in your book. So you basically you observe all those trends and you analyze them and you categorize them and you see where they're coming from. You look at the history of those trends and how they may evolve in the future, and you just try to advise designers. But you say that in your book that it isn't meant for a guide, as a guide for best practices. These are just, just to show you some trajectories and how trends may evolve, so that you can just take those ideas and push your design skills to the next level, right?
And the book that you're talking about, which is called Logo Creed, CREED, that I think we produced that in 2014, so it's 6 years old. The foundation is still perfect, as far as what's in there. Some of the material is getting a little bit older, but the foundation of how we do things is still in there. And I think one of my comments that I make in the book is that, and this goes to exactly what you just said, which is it's more important to know how you got there than to know where you are. And that relates back to this idea of, if you just look at a trend and say, I'm just going to emulate that trend, you don't have any idea how that designer came to that decision and why that trend worked for the client that they used it on. But if you understand how that trend came about, then you know how you got there. You know where you are, and you know whether or not it is correct for your client or not.
Right. So so I recommend for all you guys to check out the trends for 2020. Now you are probably soon you are going to work on the next book for 2021.
We're finishing up 2012 right now. We're just wrapping up Logo Lounge Book 12 as we speak.
Oh, okay. All right. So so what like I just wanted to ask you, as we are approaching the end of our episode, how can how you want other designers to connect with you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? And I will just include those links in the description box. And perhaps for clients who want to work with you, how they can get in touch with you as well.
Sure. They're always welcome to log on to logolounge.com, and that's the primary site. And again, it's a $100 annual membership, but I guarantee with not only do you have access to this highly searchable database of hundreds of thousands of logos, but it also gives you the ability to upload your own work to the site. And any work uploaded is always considered by our panel of judges in the next book. So anything that somebody would upload today would be considered for book number 13 when we do Logo Lounge book 13. And Logo Creed is listed amongst books on the site, as well as our books that we produce from our competition. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to me at bill@logolounge.com. And, I'm a pretty easy person to talk to, and I always enjoy Arek speaking with designers that have been doing what I've been doing, because they always teach me something new.
Right. Yeah. And I see that quite a lot. You appear on a lot of different podcasts and different blogs, which is awesome, because we need someone like you to guide us, and it's great. So it's a pleasure.
Hey, I might quickly add in here, if anybody wants to, there is a LinkedIn Learning. There are probably, 10 different courses that I have on there. LinkedIn Learning is it used to be lynda.com, but it is such an incredible tool. And I go through my trend reports on there. If you want to, if you're a member of LinkedIn Learning, or if you want to buy a membership, lots and lots of tremendous designers like Von Glitschke, And, I can't even name all of them that are on there, but a lot of what we are talking about today is covered in those courses that I've produced on LinkedIn Learning. So just go there and type in Bill Gardner, and you'll see all the different courses that I do.
Sure. So I will include all those links in the description box for you guys, so you can check out and be able to hopefully generate better logo design ideas. So Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate your passion for identity design and the work that you do as well, Arek. Thank you very much for having me.
So this is it for today's episode, and make sure to go and check out Bill's website and follow him on social media. And you can find all the links on this episode's page at ebaqdesign.com/podcast/11. So thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to my podcast for more tips on branding, strategy and design. This was Arek Dvornechuck from Ebaqdesign.